Collectors have paid up to $727,000 for these three Washington quarters, but why? They look like ordinary pocket change, yet a few hidden details changed everything. The most valuable one alone reached $353,000. So what are collectors seeing that most people miss? Let's start with the quarter that shocked the market. 1987 D. Washington. Quarter dollar. The quarter most people never look at twice. A strange thing happens at coin shows all across America. Hundreds of people walk past certain coins without giving them a second glance. Then a seasoned collector stops, leans closer, and suddenly that same coin becomes the center of attention. One of those coins is the 1987 D. Washington quarter. At first glance, it looks completely ordinary. The same familiar portrait of George Washington. The same eagle design on the reverse. The same quarter that millions of Americans carried in their pockets during the late 1980s. Nothing about it appears special. And yet, hidden among seemingly identical examples is a version that has captured the attention of serious collectors and helped transform an everyday 25-cent coin into something worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is the first chapter of a much larger story, because the deeper you look into this quarter, the more surprising it becomes. To understand why, you have to go back to 1987. America was a very different place. Shopping malls were packed. Arcade games were everywhere. Payphones stood on street corners. People dropped quarters into vending machines, parking meters, laundromats, and public telephones without thinking twice. Among those countless circulating coins were Denver mint quarters carrying a small letter beneath Washington's portrait. The letter D. Most people never noticed it. Collectors did. That tiny mint mark revealed where the coin was struck and became one of the first clues in determining whether a quarter was simply pocket change or something much more important. But here's where the story becomes interesting. A typical 1987 D. Washington quarter can look almost identical to a valuable collector-grade example. Place them side by side and many people would struggle to tell the difference. The designs match. The date matches. The mint mark matches. Even the color can appear similar. So what separates an ordinary quarter from a coin that collectors chase? The answer lies in details that many people never notice. Experienced collectors often begin by examining the strike quality. When a coin is struck by fresh dies under ideal conditions, tiny design elements appear sharp and crisp. Washington's hair details become clearer. The lettering stands out more boldly. The eagle's feathers on the reverse show stronger definition. These differences can be incredibly subtle. To an untrained eye, both coins might look the same. To a collector, they can represent two completely different worlds. And that is only the beginning. Another detail experts immediately notice is surface preservation. Every quarter begins its life looking brilliant, but once released into circulation, it faces years of wear. It slides across counters. It rattles around in pockets. It bumps against keys and other coins. Over time, small marks accumulate. Tiny scratches, contact marks, faint abrasions. Each one quietly lowers a coin's potential value. Finding a 1987 D. quarter that somehow escaped. Decades of damage is far more difficult than many people realize. That's one reason collectors pay such close attention to condition. In the coin world, condition can completely rewrite a coin's story, and sometimes its price. As the years passed, many 1987 D quarters disappeared into circulation, becoming worn and overlooked. Yet a small number survived in extraordinary condition. Some were carefully stored shortly after leaving the mint. Others remained hidden in collections for decades. A few surfaced unexpectedly from old coin albums and forgotten collections. Whenever one appeared, collectors took notice, because pristine examples from this era are not nearly as common as people assume. There is another layer to the mystery. Mint errors. Most coins leave the mint exactly as intended. Occasionally, something unusual happens during production. A die develops a crack. A strike occurs slightly off-center. A design element appears doubled. Sometimes these mistakes are dramatic. Other times, they are so subtle that only careful examination reveals them. Collectors love these unusual pieces because they tell a story about the minting process itself. They are physical evidence that something unexpected occurred during production. And when a desirable error appears on a well-preserved coin, interest can rise dramatically. This fascination with imperfections has turned ordinary-looking coins into legendary discoveries. The 1987 D quarter sits right in the middle of that conversation. Not because every example is rare, not because every example is valuable, But because identifying the exceptional examples requires knowledge, patience, and attention to detail, that challenge is part of the appeal. Collectors aren't simply buying metal, they're searching for clues. Every mark, every surface, every detail becomes part of an investigation, and that's exactly why grading plays such an important role. Professional grading services examine coins under controlled conditions and assign a grade based on preservation and quality. A small difference in grade can create a massive difference in collector demand. This is where many surprises happen. A coin that appears ordinary inside a drawer might receive a grade that places it among the finest known examples, and suddenly everything changes. The same quarter that spent years unnoticed becomes something collectors compete to own. Auction houses understand this better than anyone. When elite examples appear, bidding can become intense. Collectors recognize that opportunities to acquire top-tier specimens do not come around every day. The competition isn't about spending 25 cents. It's about securing a remarkable survivor from American numismatic history, a coin that somehow escaped the fate of millions of others. And now we arrive at the moment that makes this story unforgettable. After years of collector interest, expert examination, grading scrutiny, and auction attention, one extraordinary 1987 Washington quarter reached a value that stunned many observers, an estimated value of $353,000 for a quarter, a coin that countless Americans would have ignored without a second thought. But that's the lesson hidden inside this story. The most valuable coins rarely announce themselves. They often look ordinary. Their secrets live in the details. And what makes this even more fascinating is that the next coin in our story contains a clue that many collectors completely miss when examining quarters from this era. A tiny detail connects two different coins in a way that shouldn't make sense. Most people never notice it, but once you see it, you'll never look at these coins the same way again. There is a question that quietly follows collectors through coin shows, auctions, and private collections. Why do two coins that appear almost identical sometimes receive completely different reactions from experts? One coin gets a quick glance and is returned to the table. The other attracts magnifying glasses, careful discussion, and serious bidding. The answer is not always obvious, and few coins demonstrate this mystery better than the 1989 Washington quarter. At first, this quarter seems like an unlikely candidate for collector excitement. It comes from a period that many people consider modern. It doesn't belong to the earliest years of American coinage. It wasn't struck during the Civil War. It wasn't carried during World War II. Yet the deeper researchers looked into certain examples of the 1989 quarter, the more intriguing the story became. Because sometimes rarity isn't created by age. Sometimes it is created by survival. To understand that, we need to return to 1989. The United States was approaching the end of a decade that had transformed technology, culture, and everyday life. Personal computers were becoming more common. Shopping centers were busy. Millions of Americans handled quarters every day without paying attention to the dates. The Denver Mint continued producing Washington quarters for circulation, sending countless examples into commerce. Most would spend years moving from hand to hand. Some would spend decades. And that is where the mystery begins. Not every coin experiences the same journey. Some quarters entered circulation immediately and collected marks almost from the moment they left the mint. Others escaped that fate. A tiny number somehow survived with remarkable quality intact. At first glance, the difference may seem insignificant, but collectors know better. Most people stop their examination here. They check the date. They see the mint mark. Then they move on. Specialists often do the opposite. After confirming the date, their attention shifts elsewhere. The surfaces, the strike, the tiny details hidden within the design. And this is where the ordinary examples begin separating themselves from the extraordinary ones. A heavily circulated 1989 quarter can still be attractive, but under magnification, signs of wear begin to appear. The highest points of the design soften. Fine details become less distinct. Small contact marks interrupt otherwise smooth surfaces. These changes are normal, almost unavoidable. Yet every so often, collectors encounter an example where those expected signs seem surprisingly absent. That discovery immediately raises another question. How did this coin survive so well? The answer isn't always known. Some were carefully stored shortly after being released. Others remained untouched in collections for years. A few may have spent decades protected from the harsh conditions that damaged most of their counterparts. Whatever the reason, preservation became one of the key factors driving collector interest. And preservation alone is not enough. Strike quality matters too. Collectors usually focus on the date first, but specialists often look elsewhere. They study how sharply the coin was struck. The real difference appears when attention shifts to Washington's portrait and the finer elements of the design. On exceptional examples, details appear stronger and more complete. Lettering looks crisp. Design elements appear fully formed. The overall appearance creates an impression that experts immediately recognize, not because the coin is different, because it represents the design at its best. That distinction may sound subtle, but in the coin market, subtle differences often produce dramatic results. This is also where authentication becomes important. When a coin attracts serious collector attention, experts want confirmation that everything is genuine. Surface quality must be original. Details must match expectations. Signs of alteration can instantly change how a coin is viewed. Experienced collectors learn to recognize these warning signs. They know that authenticity is the foundation upon which value is built. Without confidence, demand disappears. With confidence, competition begins, and competition is one of the most fascinating parts of coin collecting. Collectors are not simply searching for quarters. They are searching for examples that stand above the rest. The challenge itself becomes part of the attraction. Anyone can find a 1989 D quarter. Finding one in extraordinary condition is a completely different pursuit. That pursuit fuels market demand. The better the coin, the fewer examples exist at that level. The fewer examples available, the more attention they receive. This relationship between rarity and demand has shaped the coin market for generations. Yet another question remains. If millions were produced, why would collectors care so much? The answer lies in something that surprises many newcomers. Large production numbers do not guarantee large numbers of elite survivors. A coin may begin its life as common and still become extremely difficult to locate in top condition decades later. Time changes everything. Handling changes everything. Storage changes everything. The passage of years quietly removes more and more examples from the highest levels of preservation. Eventually, exceptional survivors become their own category. That is exactly what happened with the finest known examples of this quarter. Professional grading helped identify the coins that stood apart. Experts carefully evaluated strike quality, surface preservation, luster, and overall eye appeal. The results revealed something collectors had long suspected. A small group of superior examples existed far above the average. And once that became clear, demand followed. Auction houses began paying attention. Collectors watched sales closely. The market recognized that these were not ordinary circulation pieces. They were elite survivors from an era many people overlooked. Only after understanding all of these factors does the value begin to make sense. Not because it is old, not because it contains precious metal, but because collectors compete for the very best examples they can find. That competition helped push exceptional specimens of the 1989 D Washington quarter to astonishing levels. One remarkable example reached an estimated value of $231,000, a quarter that once carried the purchasing power of just 25 cents became a highly sought-after collector prize. Yet despite everything this coin reveals, another example in this collection challenged assumptions in a completely different way. Researchers examining the final coin noticed something that initially seemed insignificant. A detail so easily overlooked that many collectors passed right by it. But once the evidence was assembled, it transformed the entire investigation. Collectors who consider this quarter the most fascinating coin of the group often change their minds after seeing what comes next, because the final coin doesn't just raise another question. It may completely change the answer. There is a reason experienced. Collectors sometimes spend more time studying an ordinary-looking quarter than a coin, covered in gold or silver, because occasionally the greatest surprise is not hidden inside a rare design, it's hidden inside something everyone believes they already understand. That brings us to the final coin in this investigation, the 1996 P. Washington quarter. At first, there seems to be very little mystery here. The design is familiar. The date is modern. The Philadelphia Mint Mark era is well known among collectors. Nothing immediately suggests that this coin belongs in the same conversation as some of the remarkable treasures that dominate auction headlines. On the surface, this appears straightforward. Yet the closer collectors look, the more complicated the story becomes. The year 1996 occupied an interesting place in American history. The country was moving toward a new century. Technology was rapidly changing everyday life. Millions of quarters flowed through cash registers, vending machines, parking meters, and pockets across the nation. Most were used exactly as intended. Few people imagined they might someday become collectible, and that assumption is where the story begins. Because the vast majority of 1996 quarters followed a predictable path. They circulated. They accumulated wear. They received scratches, marks, and damage from years of use. Over time, they became ordinary survivors of everyday commerce, but not all of them. Some examples escaped the fate of the others. Exactly how that happened is often unknown. A collector may have saved one. A roll may have remained untouched. A carefully stored group may have avoided decades of handling. Whatever the reason, a handful emerged years later with qualities that immediately attracted attention. Not because they were different coins, because they represented the coin at a level rarely seen. Most examples tell one story. Exceptional examples tell another. Collectors quickly learned that rarity is not always about how many coins were made. Sometimes it is about how many remain in extraordinary condition. That distinction changes everything. The closer specialists examined elite examples of the 1996 quarter, the more impressive they appeared. The strike quality remained strong. The surfaces retained their original character. Fine details survived with remarkable clarity. The coin looked less like a piece of pocket change and more like a preserved artifact from a specific moment in American history. That level of preservation is difficult to achieve. Even tiny imperfections can dramatically affect a coin's standing among collectors. A small contact mark, a faint abrasion, a slight loss of original brilliance. Any one of these factors can separate a good coin from a truly elite example. This is why grading became such an important chapter in the coin's story. Professional graders examine far more than the date and mint origin. They evaluate preservation, strike quality, surface condition, eye appeal, and countless small details that casual observers often miss. And sometimes those evaluations reveal something extraordinary. A coin that appears ordinary, to most people suddenly emerges as one of the finest known survivors. That recognition creates demand. Demand creates competition, and competition creates headlines. Authentication plays an equally important role. Collectors need confidence that a coin remains original and unaltered. Every surface, every detail, every characteristic must withstand scrutiny. When a coin passes those tests and achieves an elite grade, it enters a different category altogether. Now the conversation is no longer about a quarter. It becomes a conversation about scarcity, preservation, and opportunity. By this stage, the mystery that surrounded the coin begins to make sense. Not because it is ancient, not because it contains precious metal, but because exceptional. Quality becomes increasingly difficult to find as time passes. The finest examples become landmarks within the collecting community. That reality eventually influenced the marketplace. Serious collectors competed for the best certified examples available. Auction interest increased. Attention grew. And the most remarkable specimens achieved values few people would ever expect from a circulating quarter. One outstanding example reached an estimated value of $143,000, a stunning figure for a coin that once traveled through every day. American life unnoticed. And perhaps that is the real lesson hidden within all 3 coins featured in this documentary. The 1987 quarter reminded us that extraordinary value can hide behind an ordinary appearance. The 1989 quarter showed how survival and preservation can transform a common coin into a collector prize. And the 1996 quarter revealed that rarity is often created not by age alone, but by condition, quality, and the ability to endure the passage of time. In the end, these coins tell a larger story about collecting itself. True value is rarely found in what everyone notices first. It lives in the details, the evidence, the overlooked clues hiding in plain sight. And somewhere tonight, a quarter sitting quietly in a drawer, jar, or collection may be waiting for someone willing to look just a little closer.